Good evening, Chicago, and welcome back to Little City TV. I'm your host, Lisa Reyes, and on behalf of the millions of children and adults today in our country living with autism, thank you for tuning in to the only live autism awareness show in Chicago. We have another fascinating topic for you today and a wonderful guest tonight to talk about career planning for individuals with autism. But before we get started, allow me to note a couple of important items. The views expressed by our special guest on tonight's segment, each previous segment here on Little City TV, and each segment forthcoming are not necessarily the views shared by Little City Foundation, its staff, executive director, or board of directors. The purpose of Little City TV is to create an open dialogue and generate awareness for autism spectrum disorder. For explicit views from us, please feel free to call us directly. Our information will be available at the end of the program. So with us today to discuss a hot topic, career planning for individuals with autism, is Mr. James Emmett. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Emmett. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Emmett is a national leader in development of employment services for persons with autism, as well as assisting corporations in the creation of outreach efforts to the disability community. He is an individual with a disability and a parent of 2 daughters with disabilities. James currently serves as a Chief Operating Officer of Integrated Behavioral Systems, a partner in the consulting firm 2 Steps Forward, and one of the trainers at Spectrum. James is a disability consultant for TIAA CREF, Best Buy, and Jitterbug. He serves as a director of the newly created ASPE Human Resource Institute on Diversity and Disability and leads a corporate development project for the state of Indiana's vocational rehabilitation services. In 2005 to 2006, James worked as a disability program manager for Walgreens, helping set up the company's National Disability Initiative, which I hear is doing quite well.
Yes.
He also assisted Easter Seals National in laying the foundation for their National Autism Services Network. Mr. Emmett also graduated with a master's degree in rehabilitation counseling from Illinois Institute of Technology. Mr. Emmett, thank you so much for joining us this evening, or if I may, James.
No problem. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Can you tell us, James, start with telling us your own story and how you began this good work that you do?
Okay. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin and was fortunate enough to be surrounded by a lot of people who were really supportive, both my parents and the town itself. And so I was known as kind of the one-handed football player for a long time. And
what
the
position
person
did you play?
I played defensive back and
That's
wide receiver.
Wonderful. That's
so
great.
and had a really just a great opportunity to grow up in an environment where my disability was part of me, but it didn't define me, and people expected me to reach beyond and continue to push myself, and my parents did that, and the town I grew up in, and so I just felt that you know, in my career I wanted to give that support back that I got growing up.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's a wonderful story. Can you tell us a little bit about Spectrum Training, its mission, and how it was conceived?
Yep.
To our viewers.
Yep. Spectrum Training was opened 7 years ago by the company president named Cheryl Watson, and she has a grandson with autism, and so it really became her passion to be able to provide training to the people, to teachers and vocational rehab professionals and parents on topics related to autism. So I serve as the career planner and the career trainer for Spectrum Training. They've trained over 13,000 people over the last 7 years on autism.
13 individuals with autism?
13,000 people have come to their training. Yeah, and so I was just amazed at over 7 years of being able to do that. So it's a pleasure to, and now Spectrum has branched into moving from training more focused on kids to focused on adults and career planning,
wonderful.
and that's why I'm a part of it.
Wonderful.
So and November 22nd and 23rd we'll be here doing a 2-day training on career planning here in Chicago.
That's wonderful. So we'll have information on littlecity.org/autism for that conference.
Cool.
And you served as the project director for 3 award-winning research demonstration projects examining career development and transition strategies for individuals with autism and other disabilities. 3 awards, wow. Can you tell us a little bit about the award in one of these projects?
Yep. One of the primary projects that was funded by the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities was called Employ Alliance, and that project looked at the transition and employment process for people with autism and other developmental developmental disabilities, and really looked at how we work with businesses to really help people with developmental disabilities and autism find gainful employment and become part of the company culture. And so those projects together, another one was called the Vocational Alliance Autism Project that focused on transition in autism, and those together were ran out of the LaGrange Area Department of Special Education and the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce. So it was a nice mix of special education and business, and it was just a pleasure. 5 years went by. We ran 3 projects, learned a lot about, and a lot of the training and information that I do now was based on our experiences and lessons learned from those projects, working with families and and adults and kids with autism.
It's incredible to have that kind of endorsement for the work that you do already.
That's great.
It looks like we have our first caller. Caller, please go ahead. You're on the air.
Good evening. I question some of the definitions in terms of learning disabilities. If you really look at autism right now, you can classify one of the greatest minds there is, Albert Einstein, in terms of having autism. And he taught at Princeton. And sometimes I wonder, are these so many definitions in terms of learning disabilities have gotten too broad?
Maybe you can talk about the spectrum. Autism spectrum. That's a great question.
It's a great question, and I think that we've read a lot of articles about the hypothesis that Albert Einstein might have had Asperger's or an autism spectrum disorder, and I think that the truth is the autism spectrum has gotten so big that sometimes we are crossing into other potential disability categories, and people are going between those disability categories. And
that's what I mean. Don't you think it needs to be much more narrow?
In terms of the learning disability definition, the autism spectrum, I think they've tried to kind of narrow the diagnosis, but really because we're still finding more and more, it's continuing just to broaden, and hopefully there will be a focus, but I think it is very wide and it is very broad, and there are people across with all kinds of different functional skills that comprise the autism spectrum.
I think that's a great answer. There's a whole field of people just devoted to trying to figure out what the causes are of autism and the different varying degrees of autism. So that's a great question. Hopefully we can, increase the dialogue and work more together so we can, figure this out.
Absolutely.
Looks like we have another caller, popular guest tonight.
All right.
Caller, please go ahead. You're live on the air.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Dr. Emmett. From a business owner's perspective, what are the benefits of hiring people from the autism community?
Great question. I'm glad you asked. I've been working a lot with different companies like Walgreens and Best Buy and TIA, CREF, and the truth is the tenor of employing people with disabilities has really changed over the past 5 years. It's no longer a charitable effort to hire people with disabilities. It's a bottom line impact in terms of hiring people with disabilities, because the disability community, led by the autism community, is one of the fastest growing customer and labor niche markets in the world. So what companies like Walgreens, and I know Randy Lewis will be a guest on the show next week, what companies like Randy Lewis are finding is that in terms of hiring people with autism, you see an increase in diversity, you see a decrease in recruiting costs, you'd see often a decrease in turnover, you see a decrease in training costs related to the supports that can be surrounded. You are able to, as a business owner, access a variety of incentives like tax credits, training grants, and a variety of other supports that will allow you to, again, positively impact your bottom line. And one thing I think is very, very important for business owners to realize is the autism community is ever growing, and it's not just people with autism, it's friends, it's family, it's supporters. And what research is finding is that people with autism and their families are some of the most brand loyal consumers. So if they find a company that they are happy with and goes out of their way to do outreach to the autism community, they're going to keep coming back as customers, keep coming back. And so businesses, I think, are more and more recognizing the disability community as a whole as a diverse customer niche as well, but also the autism community is really at the lead of that consumer group.
That's an excellent point. So it's not just a good thing to do, it's not just a charitable thing to do, it's a good business sense.
Absolutely.
To employ into your plans and your strategies.
Absolutely.
And we have another caller waiting. Caller, go ahead, you're on the air.
Dr. Emmett, can you share an example? You talked about how it improves people's lives, but can you give me an example how when placing people with autism in a workplace, how it works how it's really helped a business or a person or somebody in some type of industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a couple examples that specifically come to mind, and one I think that Randy Lewis, when I spent 2 years with Walgreens, and Randy Lewis will probably elaborate on more next week. But for example, a lot of the visual supports that we use to initially support workers with autism in the distribution centers in Walgreens, a lot of the systems that we put in place to support productivity for the workers with autism, what ended up happening is that everybody in the distribution center ended up using those to increase productivity. So it initially was maybe a job aid for a worker with autism that ended up increasing productivity across the distribution center. I worked with a smaller business where we set up a visual match system to help somebody stock faster, and 2 weeks later, every person with or without a disability was using that visual system to stock faster, and they probably were stocking 20 to 30% faster than before we set up that system. So there can be bottom line across the visual management, those type of things have a huge impact on business.
And if you quantified how much you saved in efficiencies, like provided a monetary, value or a financial number, that would be, probably quite impressive.
Yes, so yes, increase in productivity and everything, absolutely.
And we have another caller on the air. Caller, go ahead. You're live on the air.
Hi, thanks. I had a question about workers with autism. Now, one of the things that I wonder about is how do you go about focusing different kinds of attention? Is there any kind of an attention issue when a worker with autism would start working at a certain company?
And depending on the individual, that's a good question. Depending on the individual, there might be certain strategies that we use to keep a person focused on their job. And especially for maybe somebody who in school had a little bit of a wandering attention. So you want to use visual strategies. Oftentimes we use very specific work schedules and work systems that are visually clear that help the person focus on what they should be doing, what area they should be doing. Sometimes we've talked about the concept of making sure that workers with autism stay safe. So sometimes, like for example, in distribution centers, we use very clear visual boundaries of where you walk and where you don't walk, maybe with the forklifts coming. But again, what has happened is that as we make everything in, like for example, a distribution center, even more visually clear to keep the attention of workers with autism, what happens is safety for everybody increases. So it's kind of a win-win situation. But I think that we really, depending on the individual, sometimes, and the other, for some folks who have, who want to have a variety of tasks, sometimes we build in work routines where there are, in the morning a person's doing one thing, and the afternoon they're doing another thing to keep that variety up within their specific routine.
Excellent. Great questions from
That's good questions.
City of Chicago tonight. If there are parents at home watching right now worried about the future of their children with autism, what advice could you share with them?
I think that's a great question. I think that there's a couple key things that I would look at for parents of children with autism. I would say it's never too early to start planning for a career. Mm-hmm. I've seen people come out to our trainings now who have a son or a daughter in kindergarten, mm-hmm. And people say, "Wow, that's way too early to be thinking about careers." But the truth is, the outcome of education is majorly focused on work and a successful career. So it's never too early. So I would say start planning early. I would say that one of the things that is critical to success for workers with autism is being able to build social skills to the point where they can navigate the social political pieces of a workplace. A lot of times we're seeing workers with autism who are very successful in their job descriptions but struggle with the social pieces. So I use your school time as an opportunity to practice social opportunities and practice social skills, building for the workplace. But the last thing, I would say always focus on strengths and interests. Career is built on strengths and interests. Build your child's strengths and interests. Focus on that. Allow them. I know sometimes in education planning we focus on the deficits, but build your child's strengths and interests. And lastly, I think it's a new world. I really feel that corporate corporations and companies are recognizing the value of recruiting workers with autism and customers with autism. So I know the unemployment rate still remains high for people with autism, but I would say keep your head held high. The opportunities are coming, and business world is starting to change.
I like that positive outlook, that positive attitude. Can do so much to think positively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we start our show, I asked you if I read an article, a really interesting article, about how some people with Asperger's or a form of autism make great software testers, and you actually gave me a great story that I'd like to share with our audience. Have you heard that, or have you experienced that? That that it's not just that hiring people with autism isn't just good for the brand or just good good humanitarian work, but they also have special abilities and special skills and talents that they can contribute to the workforce.
Yes.
So, could you share your Best Buy story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was actually a story from when I was doing one of the trainings. One of the parents came up to me at break and told me about her son with Asperger's, who had struggled socially a lot of his life, but was an expert in laptop computers. And so he found a job on the sales floor at Best Buy, working in California and working on sales on laptop computers. And his mom told me that in Best Buy, he is socially the most in-depth person. He is awesome. He sells customers. He sells more computers than anybody in the store, and he still struggles in other environments socially, but in his own element, using his own skills, he's right there, and he's moving forward in his career and wanting to go to the next level within the company.
That's excellent. That's excellent. It looks like we're getting through a lot in a short period of time. Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to share with our viewers about, just in general, about autism or autism awareness, or something that we didn't get a chance to talk about tonight?
Yeah, no, I think that again, I think that with the focus on it's important to begin for parents to be thinking about the social component. And one of the things that we're finding, and with my daughters with disabilities, we found this too, is schools focus, rightly so, on academics, or what the business world calls the hard skills, but we're finding almost all the situations for workers with autism end up in the social area. So again, I can't emphasize enough in terms of the teams that are out there, the teachers that are out there, that the school, growing up through elementary and middle and high school, that's the opportunity to try out new social skills, to put in social supports, to test things out, and be able to prepare. And again, I think that more and more we're seeing companies who led by, for example, the Temple Grandin movie and awareness, who are really wanting to know more about autism, and again, from that customer and business standpoint. So, but again, my number one advice is be thinking about not just your child's skills and interest in terms of what hard skills and what they will bring, but also be working on those social skills all the way along.
And if there's a business owner who's watching right now and is interested in employing individuals with autism, where could they go? Like, how do they get started?
That's a good question. I think there's a couple different websites. One of the newest campaigns, I don't know if you've seen come out, it's called Think Beyond the Label. They have several TV commercials out, and it's the first ever national campaign targeting businesses on bottom line reasons to hire people with disabilities. So it's wonderful. Think Beyond. It's thinkbeyondthelabel.com, and that's a great resource to go to. There's the United States Business Leadership Network, which is usbln.org, is another great resource as well.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. So you have a conference coming up November 22nd to 23rd in Chicago.
Yes.
What can people expect to gain at this conference?
What we do is we kind of walk people through four major areas. We talk about career assessment for individuals with autism. We talk about general career planning issues for individuals with autism, and we talk about then social skill development and the importance of developing social skills and developing supports for the workplace. And then we end by talking about working within a business and developing business relationships. So those are kind of the four major things, and we split up the 2 days and make it interactive and problem solving.
That's great. So. I know at Little City we have a vocational program and we have vocational coaches, so that our individuals with disabilities, intellectual or developmental disabilities, they can work at Dominic's, they can work at Northwest Community Hospital. They're very different, you know, all kinds of businesses that they work at, and these job coaches help them with their career goals, identifying their career goals, help them with their training, and then they work with the organization. And that program seems to be very beneficial for both parties involved, for the individual and for the employer. Is that something that Spectrum Training encourages, or do you expect companies to kind of make sure that they have trainers that can provide that support too? Where are we headed? I guess?
Yeah, no, it really is. We're seeing a trend of more and more companies kind of going the middle ground. It used to be almost solely focused on the job coaches, and that's still a good way to support individuals with disabilities. But a lot of companies now are building their internal resources, so hiring disability consultants, disability experts to work within their own company to train their supervisors and managers how to make accommodations, how to set up those natural supports that will help productivity. So really the best processes I've seen is in terms of that employment process is yes, those resources are still out there for the business owners, at Little City, where you can work with a job coach who can support the process from screening the employee to training the employee to supporting that to long-term supports and if there are issues. And it's a great added support for businesses to have. But also I think what we're finding is for long-term success, building that natural supports within the company, and like we've talked about a couple times, those natural supports are often not just used for people with disabilities, they're just used across the company. And
which helps improve efficiencies for everyone working there.
Absolutely.
So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
That's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Let's see, I have so many questions that I want to ask you. Could you share? I really I feel that when we talk about these different examples and we talk about theories and concepts, it always helps for our viewers when you put it into a story, when you put the concept or the theory. Can you share with us? I just loved all your stories. Another success story.
Sure. And one really pops. One unique success story you mentioned in my biography. I work with a company called TIAA-CREF as their disability consultant. And TIAA-CREF is an investment house that owns several businesses as part of their investment strategy. And our pilot project, in terms of developing systems to employ people with disabilities, is out at Apple Orchard in the state of Washington, and so several individuals over the past year have found employment in various areas of the orchard, and there's a specific individual with autism who we thought on the first day he was referred through the voc rehab system, and we thought on the first day, if you look down these rows, they're very long and very kind of visually overwhelming, and he would look down the rows and say, wow, I have to work, and we really didn't think, because it might not have been the greatest match for him because of the lack of visual clarity at the orchard, but it turned out he developed his own system on how to be able to look at the tree, step back from the tree, figure out what he needed to do, either pick it or thin the branches, complete that, and then move on to the next one. And he has become the leader of that project, the face of that project, and he is one of the fastest workers, and he comes to work every day. I think I heard the story. He's the only one who hasn't missed a day of work.
Really?
He was late for 5 minutes, and he's okay. He was, and he's just amazing. And it's kind of on his side. He was able to maintain the job, and what he told us is he kind of feels one with the trees. He's always liked agriculture. He loves being able to work with his coworkers, but even more be out there, being within nature and be one with the trees, and it's just been a really cool story.
Fantastic.
Amazing success.
So you mentioned that you have 2 daughters with disabilities. As a parent, as a father, what are your dreams for your children in regards to their careers? What do you want for them?
I always draw from the personal story that I said. We set the expectations high for our daughters with disabilities. We want them to be happy, but we want them to succeed, and we want to continue to push them and realize that their disability is a part of them, but there's so much that they can accomplish. And so really dreams for both of my daughters is to live independently and find work in the areas areas of interest, and we're with my oldest daughter, we're on that path, and that's really to find that happy. She's 17 going on 18.
Oh, that's great.
So we're
you
right.
look awfully young to have a 17-year-old. So she's getting ready, looking at colleges and everything?
Well, she's actually she has a developmental disability, so she's right now focusing on the last part of her high school program, and then now we're in the transition to looking at. She has very specific skills, like she loves to do laundry. She's very good at cleaning the house. So there's a lot of, we're actually looking. She loves activity, so we're looking at jobs and potentially, for example, in doing laundry in health clubs. That seems to be a real interest area of hers, and so it's one of the areas that we're looking at.
That's great. Sounds like a great child, liking to be clean and organized
and
healthy.
My wife loves it. Yeah. That's cool.
I'm sure everyone loved it. Well, it looks like we're almost out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Before we conclude tonight's program, I have a brief message from Little City Foundation. Little City is opening its first Center for Health and Wellness on its Palatine campus, located at 1760 West Algonquin Road, this Monday at 5 p.m. Maybe you can join us if you're still in town, James. So you're all invited to join us for our ribbon cutting and discover how Little City will provide specialized medical and oral health care for individuals with autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities. The unique center will take a holistic approach to health and wellness and be one of the first of its kind in the Midwest. So you're all invited to join us. If you couldn't get your question in tonight for Mr. Emmett or any guest that has appeared on Little City TV, visit our website at www.littlecity.org/autism or email us at info@littlecity.org or call me directly at 847-221-7825. Thank you very much.